Bene, salve a tutti, bentrovati a questa nuova chat, a questa nuova serata, questa nuova vlog live. E questa sera, io lo dico sempre, è sempre speciale, ma stasera sì, perché questa sera avremo il nostro primo ospite internazionale, Jim Krohn. Allora, prima cosa, l'autore di Space Empires, Talon, e ovviamente Band of Brothers. Vi ricordo, l'episodio sarà quasi tutto in inglese, comunque sia, ci saranno un attimo dei pezzi in italiano, fatemi pure tranquillamente le domande anche in italiano, poi le tradurrò per Jim e poi vi ritradurrò le risposte. Allora, intanto, prima cosa, qualche piccola notizia. Vi ricordate, sul canale abbiamo fatto il nostro video di Warfighter, sta andando molto bene. Vi ricordo che a breve ci sarà il video anche sul canale di Gabriel Cernuschi, Board Game Empire, e poi la live insieme. Anche continuiamo l'avvicinamento alle convention. In questo momento credo stia già cominciando la Vencon dalle parti di Venezia, gli amici della Vencon che salutiamo, e purtroppo abbiamo saputo che Piana delle Orme, casus belli, per motivi logistici è stata annullata. Ci sarà verso fine ottobre una nuova convention a Sorrento, ma sempre in quel fine settimana rimane il Rome Wargame Gathering della FIV, della Federazione Italiana Wargame, e soprattutto il FIV Award, il premio per il wargame inedito. Quindi veramente tante cose in arrivo nel mondo del wargame italiano, ma appunto come vedremo stasera. Non solo, ok, e adesso io credo che sia giunto il momento. Now it's the time to introduce our guest, Jim Krohn. Here you are. Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks. It's a very pleasure also for me. And we have lots of people, lots of friends. You have lots of fans in Italy. We will
Awesome.
speak. So we say hello to Claudio Ruscelli, Federico Sirtori. Eccoci qua. Here we are. Roberto Panfoli. Claudio Cipullo. Claudio is a very big fan of your design, especially the sci-fi designs. We spoke. I mean, it's a very good friend. We spoke a lot about this live. And Roberto De Innocenti. Hello, everybody. Okay, as I said, okay, but now we have Jim Krohn here, and well, I want to introduce him. It is quite weird because Jim has made not a great number of systems, okay? But those systems, those series that Jim has designed, they are very, very, very well known, especially Band of Brothers, Talon, and Space Empires. So the first question for Jim, is, as I always do, how did you knew about wargames in the first place? How did you become a wargamer? And why did you choose to focus on such a very contained number of series?
Well, it's not that I'm focusing only on those things. It's more along the lines of that's all I've had time to do right now, but one day, maybe more. But I started playing war games when I was 12 years old. That would have been in the 70s. And I played the old Lord of the Rings War of Middle Earth game.
Okay.
Because I was a big Tolkien fan, and that got me into that. And then I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I discovered Avalon Hill, which was in its heyday at the time. And I ripped through a bunch of games there, started playing a lot of Avalon Hill games, and loved wargaming.
Okay, so yeah, well, there are lots of familiar stuff I see here, Tolkien, and then we have people speaking about Star Trek. So it is very unconventional stuff for war games. I am also a very big fan of FASA Corporation's design, and I'm very happy that BattleTech is having something of a resurgence, which is a great system. But okay, so you have this first experience with war games, which are maybe not historical, And then you begin thinking about making war games.
Well, that's a little bit down the line. When I was a teenager, I was playing everything about Squad Leader you can imagine. Squad Leader, Cross of Iron, Scenario 100, Scenario 200s. I was just living in those campaign games, own leader, tracking experience points for your leader. Love all of that stuff, and played quite a diverse other, collection of war games as well. And then later, what's going to trip the designing interest is in the 90s. I'm going to play basically this monster game with a friend of mine, which took up an entire table, and we put it on a large magnetic kind of like architectural tray and magnets, and just it would set up. It would take 7 or 8 playings to get through, and we just loved it. Designing your own ships. We experimented with all sorts of rules and combat systems. We just had a blast playing it. And then we had kids, and I was working a lot of hours at Xerox at the time, and I was like, I've got to streamline this. And so that led to me coming up with Space Empires. The nascent form of Space Empires, ironically, was an overly complicated, huge monster game. And then I looked at everything that was in the game and what did I want to keep? How could I distill this down to what I love the most? And that's how Space Empires comes about. After Space Empires gets accepted, that's when I'm going to start that, that's, by the way, that's going to take a long time. Space Empires is going to be designed all through the 90s and into the 2000s. And I think the first time I submitted it to a company was like 2000 or so, something around that time. And it got rejected. I kept on getting rejected by company after company. And then eventually GMT said, let me think about it, basically. And I went back and forth with them for numbers of years. They kicked it back to me. I kicked it back to them. And they weren't sure of me because I was a brand new designer. I didn't have anything published yet. And then they finally said yes and took it. And I really, and that was going really well. And so that's what started me designing. And then I was like, I love Squad Leader, but I've grown to hate ASL.
You're like my father. My father is just like, he loves Squad Leader and thinks, okay, ASL ruined it. Destroyed the simplicity, the storytelling aspect. He always said that to me. We have one of the first boxes of Squad Leader, but we do not have anything about advanced Squad Leader.
Well, I played quite a few. I got about 5 modules into Advanced Squad Leader. And then I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I started, I'm going to redesign this because now I'm technically a designer. And even though the game hadn't been published yet. And so I started doing a lot of reading and research. And I had very much a difficult experience because as I would be reading, I'd be like, well, Squad Leader gets this all wrong. I mean, Advanced Squad Leader gets this all wrong. And then I would read some more and I was like, oh, they got that wrong too. And I went through this pain process where I was like, there's everyone, because the way I phrase it is ASL has cast a long shadow on the community. It's got the thickest rule book. It was the first one there. And everyone just assumes that because of the size of the rule book, that it must be the most accurate, most realistic. And so a lot of the systems that have come after that have kind of copied its mistakes, I feel. And so I had to basically start from scratch. And that's going to lead to Band of Brothers.
Yeah, and this is also a constant of your game design style, because I see you always, maybe it is because of your engineering background, but you always take complicated things and try to make them simpler to have the same effect of more complicated things. And in many times, especially for me, with Band of Brothers, with better effect, the more effective. We have other people coming in. Renzo says, would you mind stopping making me spending so much? Because everything, there are people here that everything that comes out of Jim Krohn's desk, okay, you have to buy it.
Thank you.
Okay, Geo, also other people coming. Welcome. And Roberto Di Innocenti has an interesting observation. I can second it, but even SL has its problems with you. always sure.
But let me say this: in the 70s, the end of the 70s, there, early 80s, it was revolutionary. It was like Catan was for Euro games. There was It was so innovative. The idea of just even using morale, and that it was. I have to give it its props, because it was either that or play Africa Corps or War at Sea. I mean, for its time, it was amazingly brilliant. So I speak of, and I remember all those times I had playing that as a teenager. I speak of it in glowing terms always. It's like, I don't want to necessarily play it today, but I still rate it a 10 on Board Game Geek because I loved it so much. It was such a part of my life. And we don't have Band of Brothers without Squad Leader, I don't think.
Yeah. I read that in your, and here we are. A small, the battle manual. You are very clear about that. There are very, okay. Now we will speak about the Kickstarter. There's a lot of good new stuff incoming. There is a new edition of the battle manual, but if you can get a hold also the first edition of the battle manual,
everything in the first edition will be in the second.
Will be in the second, so wait for the second, buy the second, or if you have the first edition in your shelf and you have never read it, it is a very good read, and I'm very eager to read the second edition because, well, Jim, let's say you're another interesting aspect of you as a designer, that you are very active with the community on the not just on the social media, on the various platforms. On Board Game Geek, especially Board Game Geek. If you want to know something new about something interesting about Old Breed, but also about history, go to Board Game Geek and read Jim's series of posts. Is an ongoing series of posts about Old Breed. Lots of historical content there, and lots of relations between how historical content is portrayed in the simulation.
Right.
It's very, 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 very interesting. But lots of this stuff is condensed in text like this. And you are very clear about the heritage of Squad Leader in Band of Brothers. Which leads me to another question. What do you seek in a simulation? When you design a simulation and when you play a simulation? What are you seeking? What are your purposes, your objectives, your goals?
In playing or designing?
First in playing and then in designing.
Well, I want to have an enjoyable experience. I don't want to have one where I'm tied down to the rules all the time, especially since I'm a bit of a gaming journalist. I'll do Euro games with my family. I'll do war games one-on-one. My son and I play a bunch of war games a lot, and I really enjoy like the generality of it, or like I enjoy a lot of different topics, I should say. And so having one, like I felt like if I were to go all in on ASL back in the day, I felt like that would be the only game I'd be allowed to play, because it took all my time to really master that rule book.
Yeah.
And I've kind of joked with other people that, you know, they'll be two people that'll be playing all the time, and I'll say, well, that's your ASL life partner. Like, that's what you do. You get together with them and you play SL. And so I wanted more than that. And then I wanted to have that simplicity there, but then I want to have some historical fidelity. Doesn't have to be perfect. And I think I'm probably unfair in this, in that the more I know of a subject, the harsher I am as far as wanting better fidelity. Like, for instance, I like the game Sekigahara by GMT.
Yeah, great game.
And I love the game and rave about it, tell everybody about it. And I read their designer notes for it, and it seemed like it fit really well with what he was trying to accomplish. But I have no illusion that it's exactly like that history, but it's very representative of it. And so it's good enough for me. Whereas something like, say, Band of Brothers, I look at an ASL board and I see 3 squads stacked in 1 hex with all the support weapons and the best leader. And I'm like, there's never in a million years anybody in the field is going to deploy their men that way. And it breaks my suspension of disbelief, and I can no longer enjoy the game, you know? Because now I'm like, there ought to be a purpose to these rules, because obviously we could play chess. We all know the rules to that.
Okay.
Have more flavor, and we want to be kind of set in it. And so we're willing to put up with more rules for the game, for the enjoyment aspect, but that ought to get you some fidelity. No one thinks that chess represents actual combat. That's not how it works.
You will be surprised that there are some people who think so. And also, as a military history enthusiast, I always tell them, do not believe that in any way. This is not even war. This is conflict, which is totally just another thing. Just totally another thing. If you want to see what war is on a strategic level, probably you best go and play your next card-driven game, which is with a lot of political aspects too, and economic. If you want to have an idea of what strategically a war is, chess, okay, it is abstract, it is conflict. We can always play chess with dice, good, but this is not war. This is not war.
Not at all.
Well,
no, I was just saying that if I'm to play the game and win and play it well, I've got to do the exact opposite of what a commander in the field would do. I can't play it. Like I said, it breaks my suspension of disbelief. Yeah. I realize, though, at the same time, that as much hard as I've tried to give Band of Brothers some fidelity, it's not real because no one's shooting at you. Obviously, everybody behaves differently when real bullets fly. So, we're very cavalier with our troops. A lot of times we ask them to do all sorts of things that we would never do ourselves. So, no, it's certainly not war. But there are other challenges in command that are not represented in Band of Brothers. But what is represented, I've tried to make it have good fidelity so that it doesn't break your suspension of disbelief.
Let me tell you about a story about my first play of Band of Brothers when I had some troops in a ditch, inside a ditch, they were in cover. And then I said, okay, guys, let's move on. And I kept failing morale roll after morale roll after morale. They did not move. I began yelling at my counters. Very bad words. They didn't move probably because they were Italian words. I was yelling at them. Muovete! Then they did not move. And then I realized it was turn 2 or 3 of the first scenario that I was playing. Okay, this game is different. Okay, I have to approach it in another. This is not. I do not have control. I'm not giving orders to those people. I'm giving people. I'm giving directives and giving them directions. Go there. The enemy is there. Make some covering fire and advance. And they choose how to and when to advance in which one. This was a very enlightening experience because I'm not dealing anymore with just counters. I'm dealing with counters representing people, which was very different. Lorenzo Gentile says, for what I see, there's a point where you have to stop trying to simulate everything, or you get a monster game such as Campaign for North Africa, which in my opinion does not simulate much very well. How can you decide where you have to put this limit? Yeah, and then we come to you as a designer. Thanks, Lorenzo. Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. So for Band of Brothers, the decision point was the idea of how do people respond to fire, and the idea of suppression, which wasn't in other games except as a kind of an add-on or side thing, but not as a main mechanic. The idea that you don't, like in Squad Leader, just as a comparison, you get broken units and then you've got to bring a leader by, he's going to miraculously rally them and then they're 100% fine. Whereas in everything I've read about combat is, if you want people to keep ducking, you got to keep shooting at them. So suppression wears off relatively quickly without any kind of special action. So even if you've gotten a unit suppressed, it's going to flip one back just the next turn, and you better keep firing at it. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be a problem. And I think if we think about that in real terms, that makes sense. I mean, that's exactly how that works. And so that's what I really wanted to capture. The other thing I really wanted to capture, like the main point, was the idea that the training and the proficiency matters. Proficiency shows up especially with the armor.
The vehicle rules. Yeah,
it makes a big difference. And so like I could never explain, like when I was playing SL, I'm like, how did these Panzer IV's deal with T-34s?
Yeah,
there's just no way.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. How could they have possibly done it? And then with this system, it makes perfect sense. You can see the vulnerability because the T-34 has better armor and a better gun, but yeah, you can see how they can do it, and those tactics come alive in the game.
Yeah, I like especially how you treated morale, because you made morale a function of command. So you do not test morale when things are going bad. When things are going bad, they're going bad. Full stop. You test morale to get people execute commands.
Yes,
which is totally a totally different thing. You have to convince, you persuade your people to get their trust to do something, and you have to keep them well covered. You do not have to advance them too much with unnecessary risks. And Roberto, once again, I think that you cannot make a total simulation. You must choose an aspect of what you want to simulate and follow that. Yeah, absolutely. And Band of Brothers in that aspect is really something. Absolutely. Also, how you deal with suppression, because in Band of Brothers, suppression is actually more important than direct lethality of weapon. You made a very good example in those books about people shooting on the firing range, lots of ammo, and a marine surgeon putting a balloon inside the foxhole, and lots of people shooting at that foxhole, and the balloon was not touched because there was not a single direct hit. Suppression is more important than lethality in your system.
If you get casualties from distance, that's great. But again, you're not going to get casualties from distance. First line squads firing at first line squads that are in good cover is not going to generate casualties from distance. You've got to find, fix, flank, and finish. You've got to put them under suppression and then get in close to finish them.
Fire and maneuver, fire and movement, that is the key. And this is something that your games really taught me about the 4F: find, fix, flank, etc. and finish. Close combat, that is lethal, and it is rightly so. Okay. With all this, do you think that your system is as introductory as some people call it? Some people call, okay, Band of Brothers is simple, it's easy, it's accessible, because it is accessible. We have 8 pages of rules, 7 or 8 pages of rules before the vehicles. With the vehicles, we have 12 or 13 pages of rules, which is very, very short for a tactical game. Do you think it is really that introductory as a war game?
No. I think sometimes people try to rationalize it in the sense of, oh, well, look at these other rule books, they're thicker. This must be an introductory version. And I've actually had conversations with people on Board Game Geek.
Yeah.
Maybe you've read some of them where they're like, well, okay, I'm going to try Band of Brothers. I like this. I'll move on to the real thing now with the like, no, that's not what I mean. So I hope it's more accessible than Squad Leader and ASL and any other tactical system. And it's got the shortest rule book, I suppose. So I hope it's accessible, but I don't want people to write it off as something that's simplistic. And I've read lots of comments like that. Oh, well, this is okay for what it is, but it's so simplistic. And of course, I don't feel it is. I feel it's accurate.
Yeah, you know, a good proof of that is that if you use simplistic tactics in Band of Brothers, you are not going to survive past turn 2 or 3. All your people are going to get killed or running away. You have to use complex, sophisticated tactics, combined arms, the support with vehicles, with artillery. You have to organize the movement of your troops in a very, I don't know if it is realistic, but at least plausible way.
Yeah, fair enough.
Even if you play the Russians, if you get the classic human wave, that human wave gets slaughtered, and then it's over. You do not have so many countries, which is good, which is correct. Most of the times they did not use those human wave tactics. They're a movie thing. They're much more sophisticated. I think I read the phrase in one of your posts. It is that this game just makes sense. I think this is the most important thing. And another aspect, and then we switch off to the Kickstarter with Old Breed. But it is important to let people know this game. As I told you, there are not many copies available of the first edition, so many people have seen it played, but they did not play it first time. Dispensing with leaders, which is something of oh my God, what happened? What happened here? We have no leaders. We have no officers. It's total chaos and madness.
Yes, I'm going to hell because of that.
Yeah. Okay.
No, and the reason why I did it is because, again, it probably was exacerbated by the fact that I was reading things on the 101st, the 101st Airborne. It was very apparent to me that the squad leadership was the most important leadership in the battle. They had their own leaders, as it were, and sure, there was upper level leaders, but they did not perform the movie style actions that that the current gaming systems kind of promoted.
Yeah.
So you have units that are broken, and then some guy comes by and magically rallies them. I mean, that's not what was needed. Basically, it would have happened internally. And the other problem with leaders is, again, it complicates other things in the sense that it messes with your tactics, because now you have a leader and you give the leader an ability. And so then you want to stack everybody with that leader. And now that's kind of ASL's problem. If you ask, you've got a 10-3 leader, you're going to put every squad you got. You can get them in that hex. You want to get them in that.
And listen with that leader.
Because that leader is going to protect them because of his morale bonus. And I understand. By getting rid of the leaders, it made the tactics better.
Okay. You get away with that movie thing, and also because you are ironic. The very first scenario in Screaming Eagles, it's a lot of high-level officers behaving like soldiers. I remember an episode where there are a lot of captains and lieutenants detached from their units, and they have to go on the attack by themselves. It is very funny. Actually, it is very funny. Okay, so Kickstarter, Old Breed. Let's get literally to business. Kickstarter is active. It is on Kickstarter now. Old Breed, which is South Pacific, Guadalcanal, if I'm right.
And New Britain, yes.
Yeah. Okay, and New Britain. So once again, a very focused set of scenarios. What will we have new in this Kickstarter? Not just another army, not just another faction in Warhammer sense. I know that there will be lots of new and good stuff.
Yes. It plays differently. I mean, the rules are the same, but it plays differently in your tactics. It's much bloodier, much more close in. The jungle terrain really slows things down. The jungle terrain for just comparison, on Guadalcanal is 3 movement points a hex. So you're not moving through 2 hexes of jungle unless you're using a command point, kind of a rule we've added for that. And then it gets a little bit thinner. It's only 2.5 movement points on the New Britain. But then there's this whole mechanic with the jungle where you're not automatically, normally when you're concealed, if someone moves adjacent to you, you're revealed.
Okay.
If you're in the jungle, that you can ignore that. You don't have to reveal yourself. And so you'll have at times as the Japanese where you instead will hold your fire until they move into your hex, hoping to get an ambush. And
lots of infiltration and ambushes there.
It reads, or it plays just like I read. Like when I read about how they had to do things, it was very different than in the ETO. And this is going to result in a much closer and much more bloody combat, much more close.
Much more dramatic.
The reason why we made it South Pacific was because once you get to Central Pacific, the terrain is far more European. Hills, areas, right? But Guadalcanal, New Britain is the thick, steamy jungle. And so that takes the Marines through 1942 and 1943. And so the next Pacific one, which will be down the line a little bit, will be Central Pacific, and that will deal with the Marines in 44 and 45.
Yeah, later phase of the war. We haven't. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
No, I was just gonna keep doing an information dump if you want me to.
Yeah. We love information dumps. We are war gamers. We love information.
So, Japanese, one of the things we came because I wanted them to behave. I wanted them to behave right, and so. Like when I first started playing the Japanese, I think I got their casualty number right, and I got their firepower right, and all of that. And I penalized them in melee because the Japanese really were hung up on cold steel. They wanted to use the bayonet and the sword, and they believed in Seishin spirit is what that means, and that was going to drive them, and that their willingness to do that would bring them to victory. So I would, and that's why the traditional thing where you see a Japanese soldier charging with a bayonet or with a sword, and then they get shot down because Americans relied on firepower. And so I penalized them in melee, and then that made me not want to put them in melee. So, and that was just the opposite. I think it was accurate, but it was leading to the wrong idea. And so we give them the Seishin ability, which basically ups their stats when they charge. On the defense, they're terrible in melee, but they're much better when they charge. And so your incentive as a Japanese player is to deploy them just like the Japanese really deployed themselves on Guadalcanal. And you will get into sometimes these weird kind of countercharge situations, which literally happened in real life. And so I'm really happy with how we've captured that. And then on the Marine side of things, you just get to see the evolution of the Marines. So the first line Marine squad in 1942 has a 4 firepower, which seems almost insulting, but they were still using bolt action rifles back from World War I. And I think it's representative. Then they start going to a more modern, and they use the M1, and they have more bars in the squad, and they go to firepower 5. And then by the time you get to 1944, the Marines are going to be 13-man squads with 3 4-man fire teams, each with a bar and a commander then overseeing them separately, each with the fire teams, each with its own commander. And they're going to basically pioneer the use of fire teams, and they're going to be deadly. So you're going to be able to see this transition of the Marines throughout the war.
This evolution. Lorenzo has another interesting question. Have you played Brother in Arms, the video game? I did.
No.
It's cool how it simulates suppression, and it reminds me Band of Brothers quite a lot. Really? I did, and yes, if you go playing Brothers in Arms as you would play Call of Duty, for example, so you go around and start shooting, even that you won't last much. You have some characters, you can give orders, and see other. It is very, very low level, just a squad of people. You give orders with shortcuts, with keys, and so you get flanking fire, you see the Germans down, suppress it, and then you go around and flank them, and you go in. It is very interesting. There are a lot of episodes. The last one was about, I think, Hell's Highway, Market Garden. The very interesting series, and I know that they are doing new episodes as well. Yeah, and these give me. It is a very difficult game. because once again, you get in a video game and you say, okay, I'll go on full John Rambo. I go and okay.
That's interesting. You have my interest peaked. I'm going to look at that.
Yeah. Try it. No, they're not that hard to find. They're quite cheap now because they are quite old. I think they are maybe 8 or even 10 years old as video games. And it is a very interesting series, all in first person. Okay, it's an FPS, but it's a very tactical FPS. Oh, Giulio Bottazzi, our common friend. Hello, Jim and Ricardo.
Hey.
Band of Brothers games are built around specific formation. It is a distinctive feature of the series. Your opinion about pros and cons of this approach?
Well, that was a little bit of... I wanted to set my tactical game apart from all the others. And I felt like, how come this has never been done? Well, we should do that. And I love the 101st. Actually, if I were to back up, I would say I was going to start with the 11th Panzer. And Worthington said, for your first game, you have to do a Western.
Okay.
You have to do an American unit for the first game. So, and basically I negotiated with them and they say, if you do an American unit, if you do the 101st, we'll let you do the 11th for Ghost Panzer. I said, okay. So
okay,
it wasn't a bad decision because there was so much more information on the 101st. So no complaints there. But all right, where were we going with this question again?
Okay, why did you choose specific formation in the first place?
I wanted to help set it apart from others, and that's been good. Because I've read more first-person accounts because of that, but it's also been bad because I feel like one mistake. If I were to confess my sins here, I would say one mistake I made with Band of Brothers was I wanted to have a scenario on all of these major actions. I really wanted to tell the story of the division.
Okay,
and that was the wrong focus. I am not 100% happy with all of the scenarios in Band of Brothers. I mean in Screaming Eagles.
Screaming Eagles, the first title.
I was when I first did it because they were the only scenarios in the series. But now that I've played more of it, there are a couple of them that I don't play anymore. And we're trying to actually fix this. And you don't need to buy anything to get this. We'll eventually post the new scenario book, but we have updated about 6 scenarios in Screaming Eagles to make them better and more balanced and more fun.
Okay.
But even still, I got caught up in telling the story. I got much better at that. And then I'm really happy with where I am now, where essentially most of the scenario design is done by others. And then I try to improve upon it. I really kind of feel like designing scenarios is not my strength. I feel like designing the system is my strength, and other people are better at scenarios because I'll read someone's scenarios like, wow, that's really clever. That's such a good idea.
They're more specialized. Yeah.
I don't know. So lately the scenarios have been being designed by other people, and I've just been refining them.
Okay, 2 things. I really loved your Texas Arrows scenarios. I think they're very good. I really loved it.
Dickens gets the credit for that.
They're very good. A good mix of scenarios, smaller scenarios, larger ones, and not just because most of them are in the campaigns in Italy, but it is very interesting. And also for first edition owners, remastered or not remastered, there will be update packs in the Kickstarter. I just saw it. So, for example, just like me, I pledged also the new counters because they are already rounded. There are small improvements in the quality. And those counters are the counters for all the titles that have been published until now. They are up to the new standard, and you can buy that as an upgrade pack. And thank you, Worthington, for putting the new scenarios, the new revised scenarios, as free PDF downloads.
You guys really want the game, absolutely.
Yeah, this is great service to the community. I understand one objection that people make to that Kickstarter in Europe. It is that it is not Euro friendly. It is not Worthington's fault. It is very complicated to get Euro friendly. Let's hope that the customs are merciful. But
I begged Worthington to see if there was any way.
Yeah,
I have many European fans, and I begged Worthington for that, but they couldn't pull it off. And I understand. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I understand.
They definitely.
However, it is very worth it. Oh, Lorenzo remembers us that the brother announced video games are from 2005 and 2008. Oh no! Okay. Yeah, I was not yet married. I could play them all night. That's why I got married in 2010. Yes, that's the all accounts. Okay. However, also the Kickstarter will have republished editions of every single title. The series is beginning again. Yeah, this is great.
And I'm going to tell you, it got put on a hiatus for a couple reasons.
Yeah.
It got put on
why?
Because I could not solve the Japanese for a while. Right. And I would play it, and it wasn't right. And so I kept on having to go back and go back and go back. And Dean is remarkably patient because he hung with me through this process. And we finally got it right. And then the other reason along with that lines is I didn't want rules creep to continue. So I wanted to get what I've been calling the rule book of the apocalypse, which is just all of the rules ever. So we never have to work on the rule book again.
Oh my!
So it's got everything. It's got all the desert terrain and everything in there. It's got and I'll drop you some information on that in a second. But it's got everything for the next module. And the rule book was always the long pole in the tent as far as getting these games out. And so now that we have not only Old Breed done, but we have the rule book set, the games will begin to come out faster. So part of that though is the fact that it's been on hold while we're still working on Old Breed. Is other game modules have been kind of queuing up behind it. And so Stalin's favorite, dealing with the end of the war tanks and all the big bad machines is the next one after this. And I'm not sure the order, but we already have a module done on the Elite division in
Venerdì. Yes, I've read it.
And that was a purposeful decision on our part. Everyone wants to do, the desert rats. And I was like, well, who are they fighting? Let's do the other side. And so Commonwealth will get their due. We're going to have a Commonwealth module, but for North Africa, I wanted to have an Italian module.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I also thank David Thompson because in the undaunted North Africa there were no Germans, there were British fighting Italians. Which is correct, which is historically correct. There are a lot more of Italians fighting the Commonwealth in North Africa, and I'm very, very curious about how you will portray the Italian army strengths and weaknesses, and many weaknesses in North Africa, to keep scenarios balanced. The guys at Lock and Load in Heroes of North Africa have done a very good job at it. I have to say, I like Heroes of North Africa. Yeah, I like that module inside the Lock and Load tactical system environment, which is totally different from Band of Brothers, but they work well. So I'm very, very curious to see how you dealt with such a peculiar army and armed forces as Italian forces.
It helps that we were doing a read, because that was definitely a better grade of troops, much better than they're given credit for, I feel.
Yeah. The armored forces, yes, absolutely. I agree. And Giulio Bottazzi, we are looking forward for Ariete. Everyone is looking.
Is that how that's pronounced? Ariete.
Yeah, Ariete, which is ram, essentially, right. The animal Ariete. Okay, and so on. And you also spoke about the future developments for the series. Anything else in particular that you want to say about the Kickstarter, other than pledge? Something in particular?
If you like Band of Brothers, you're gonna love how different Old Breed is. You're gonna love the different tactics, and I kind of feel like this is kind of important to me. Is I wanted to capture the feel of the flavor. Again, I don't want to break your. It's not going to be perfect, but I don't want to break your suspension of disbelief. And I feel like we accomplished that, for instance, in Ghost Panzer, by just the interactions of the vehicles. That was what, the idea that, why, I read all these things and these Russian T-34s are just charging into their lines and charging up close. Why aren't they staying off? I mean, their gun, if it was portrayed like it's portrayed in let's say ASL, their right move is to be standoffish. And so we captured the feel such that you're going to deploy them like the Russians did. You're going to get within a closer range so that you don't have to make a proficiency roll, and because your proficiency stinks in that tank. And so you get very realistic behavior. And in the same way, we capture that in Old Breed, where it's so bloody, it's so close up. The Japanese do want to charge. It's to their benefit to charge at times. Japanese, on the other hand, at times will lay low and stay concealed in jungle and try to ambush you in melee. It really captures the feel well.
Yeah. And if you do half a good job as you did on the previous titles, it will be awesome. I can tell you.
Well, also, I have a great team, to be honest with you. I'm very, very happy. Julio is one of the play testers. He's got his own thing that he may be adding to the series. We won't get too premature on that.
Okay.
He's helping out with content as well, and I'll send an email to a bunch of guys, and I'll be like, "What am I doing here?" And I really try to. I won't say who did it, but just today, I got, or maybe it was yesterday, an email from one of the guys, and it was just something that I had suggested or we were talking about, and it just kind of like was ripping us up a little bit, like, what do we, this is terrible. And the person said, well, I don't want to be a wet blanket. And we all responded, no, we love this. Let's work out all the kinks now. Let's be vicious before production so that it's better after production. And so that's one of the reasons you had asked me earlier. I don't think I answered it, why I was so active on Board Game Geek. It's not just for promotion. It's for sharpening my sword, as it were. The interaction I have back and forth with people. I've had to defend my ideas, and I've also tried to persuade people. And there's been good criticisms that have come out of that I think have improved the system.
Which is quite interesting for Board Game Geek, because I've seen lots of bad stuff happening there. But the Band of Brothers sections of Board Game Geek are very civil, are very measured. Which is and one last thing about Band of Brothers: if you want to have a very good but concise synthesis of what Band of Brothers is, go on Board Game Geek on the Band of Brothers Screaming Eagle page, and you see a file by Jim, which is Why Band of Brothers. It is the very first time I've seen something like that published written by designer. Why Band of Brothers, which is a quite short document. It is not so long, discussing some points about the system in general. It is quite old because it was written when Screaming Eagles went out, so 12 years ago, I think. Something like that. But it is still very, very valid. One last thing, the rules. Okay, Giulio has another question. Can you tell us something about the updated battle manual? Yes, we were speaking about the battle manual
It will have everything that was in the old battle manual, although there is a chance that we may get. Well, I better wait until I get approval from Worthington.
Do not break your NDA.
It'll have everything from the old battle manual, plus it'll have information about the Pacific added, and we are hoping some extra examples that we're going to put in there as well.
Okay, that would be good. Actually, my own question was, what about the updated rule book? Will it have some interesting updates to the general system, or the general system will stay more or less the same with some exclusive rules for the Japanese? Will we see some important changes in the general system of Band of Brothers?
There are just some minor tweaks.
There's
really major. One of them, probably the most major, is that we, in addition to what you can spend a command point on already, you will also be able to spend a command point to give one of your units one extra movement point that turn. And so that really helps when you're in the jungle and you are coming up against three movement point jungle hexes. And it kind of just makes sense. I think it's an appropriate use of the command point without that. But the motivation for putting it in was probably Old Breed.
Yeah.
So there's minor changes like that. But yeah, there's no major things to the system. Now, again, there is going to be some optional rules that you have to use in Old Breed. Like, for instance, the flank rule. You have to use that in Old Breed because of the rigid doctrine of the Japanese. And so that makes a big difference in close assaulting Japanese, especially since the Japanese have such high morale. And so that will actually kind of give you a better chance to get in close with them.
The last point can really make the difference in very, very precise situations. So let's get we did Band of Brothers, and people in the public, ragazzi, se avete altre domande, if you have other questions about Band of Brothers, do it, fatele. But we are going to pass to another subject, to a very, very fun subject for me, which is your sci-fi designs. Let's get very short because time really flies, but we still have some time. Talon. Okay, let's begin with Talon. I am a very avid tracker, and I have to ask two questions. First one is, why make Talon? Why make this game? And the second one is there a future development for Talon? Are there other modules coming out for Talon? Because Talon is a very interesting game system, and so where does it come from, and where is it going?
It comes from me playing large space tactical games like Starfleet Battles all through my teenage years. Again, that's what, man, I played sports and I played war games. That's what I did my entire teenage years. So so it comes from that. And then, so now we fast forward, and I think we were around 2006, and it was around Christmas time, and I got the flu bad, and I was laying in bed, and I was thinking about designing, because that's what you do sometimes when you've got something else you can do. And I started thinking about how I'm going to I need to make a tactical game that I enjoy at this point. And again, the same kind of principles of, I don't want to have a huge rule book. I want to be able to play squadrons and fleets as opposed to just individual ships. And I wanted to kind of streamline all that. And and the basis of Talon was me figuring things out in my head while I had the flu. And then, and then I started, when I got better, I started to write it down. And I actually started with laminated cards. Yeah. So it was almost like a miniature game where you move cards around the table. And then I
write on them.
Right. And then I switched to what you see today. And I again, there's a bunch of design decisions went into why we did what we did. Like, the weapon ranges are short. There's reasons for that. That's because, well, it represents fast distances, I suppose. But we wanted to put all the information on the individual ship counters so that it would be like a heads-up display, a giant heads-up display on the map, where you could see what shields are down, what, just by glancing at the map, you could see what weapons were charged. And so that meant I had to have larger hexes. And unless I wanted this thing to take up the entire dining room floor, I had to have shorter range. But there was more to it than that. What I wanted to do was make it so that maneuver was the king of that game. And so, like, for, you know, the ranges, say, just as a simple example, when I would play Starfleet Battles, the ranges were long enough that even with if I was playing multiple ships, I could always get an alpha strike off on the shield I wanted to do whatever I want. I could always pull that off. And in Talon, it's much harder because the ships are, you very quickly get out of weapons range, or one hex of weapons range makes a difference. And you very quickly move when you're getting in close. It's harder to keep everybody firing against the same shield or have the right shield facing the enemy. And so Talon is at its core a game of maneuver.
The energy management system also disrupts Talon sequence because you have ships coming before or after, but you have to do that because you need more energy in that department, or the other. The interface, the Talon interface, really reminds me of that scene in the end of The Undiscovered Country, where we on the Excelsior Bridge, and we see small ships on a display with hexagon with hexagon around them, moving on a two-dimensional maps, and then here it comes, or here is the Enterprise, and this very and we have lots of those small ships. There's a very, very good interface, and I think that the system of writing down the various values on the counters and then erasing them, etc. It is a pure stroke of genius. Absolutely great interface. But what about the future developments of Talon? Have we got something new in the works, at least in the works?
So the next box planned is Talon Galaxy at War. 2 new empires, standalone game. So you could just buy that box and then play those 2 empires against each other. And then if you like it and you didn't have the original Talon, you can get the original Talon as well, and play any of the empires against each other. Talon got put on hold because right now I'm trying to land both Old Breed and Space Empires, All Good Things. So I only have so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
Those 2 things just suck up all my time. There are other reasons, like I've been campaigning for some things which I cannot talk about.
Okay.
But
we understand.
They are, but what happened is COVID threw a big giant mess in that. And so there are a couple things that could come about which might, I think, improve the game. Not that I don't love the game the way it is, but it's not dead. I love that series. Talon might be my favorite game that I designed. I love Space Empires. I love Band of Brothers, but you know, I really love Talon. So I want to set your people's mind, because I was just asked this question, I think, on Board Game Geek: is Talon dead because nothing's come out of it? I'm like, no, far from it. I don't want you to think that. I don't hate this child. I love this child. I want to do something. So something will come, but it won't come until after Space Empires.
Okay. And let's get to Space Empires. Space Empires for X. We here on the channel, we know it very well. I made lots of videos of unboxing of all the of the base box and the expansions that have been published. I think that is the ultimate for X sandbox, because essentially you can get whatever you want out of that universe. Also, it is full of Easter eggs, and I really love finding all the small mentions. The last expansion, which and the title is an Easter egg in itself, because it is All Good Things, which is the final episode of TNG. So when I read that, a tear came on my eye, because okay, now it is going to be over. 2 things. What are we going to get in that expansion, and why is it the final expansion?
Before I answer those 2 things, let me back up and say something about Space Empires in general. Because you've asked me about what I was trying to accomplish in the other designs, and we haven't talked about that in that terms with Space Empires 4X. What I wanted was a game where you were not rewarded for turtling. I wanted powerful technologies that could be countered. But what that would lead to is it would force you to take space. It's actually, in some ways, we talked about chess earlier, it's very chess-like. If you control the center of the board, you can surprise spring technology. You can surprise your opponent with technologies that can be devastating, and you can spread out and attack different areas of their empire. Whereas if you control the center of the board, your opponent cannot do the same to you. And so you're rewarded for pushing out there. And I didn't want a turtling game. So that was kind of at the heart of it. The other heart about it was I wanted fog of war in it. You're coming up against an empire that you don't know what they have. And some of the best moments in sci-fi books or in sci-fi series is when you encountered something which you couldn't handle. And so then you had to fight a retreat for a little while until you could figure out how to handle it. And so that requires an expansive tech tree. And so the first company I submitted it to was not GMT. Actually, like I said, I submitted this to several companies. One of the great criticisms that I kept on getting back was, you can't make it through your tech tree. You can't make it through, we get through a third or a half of the tech tree. And I kept on trying to tell them that's a feature, not a bug.
Okay.
I want it to be that way, because if you always get through all your tech tree, then you always know what the other person has. Right?
Everyone has everything, so it is useless. Yeah.
And most games, if you play the game well and you have a winning game, you're supposed to make it through almost all of your tech tree. And I wanted to have it so that, again, to preserve the idea of being able to strike your opponent with something they didn't know was coming. I wanted to have these different curveballs you could throw at them with technology. So I wanted to have a tech tree that was large enough so that unless you get deep into the game, you are not getting through that tech tree. Unless you go longer than, 10% of the games, maybe 5% of the games, you might get close to getting through the tech tree. And that was all done intentionally because that stimulates the aggression. Once you know what everybody has, then you can better defend. And so I wanted to have it to be a game where you had to push forward and take space.
Okay, yeah. So you have to choose, do I focus on fighters or stealth technology? And when I get in contact with an adversary, with an opponent, he doesn't know what I've been focusing on. And so maybe he has not the good defenses, so he has to withdraw, gain time, and build up and say, oh, you did fighters. Okay, I have to do some countermeasures.
And if you find out about that at one of your colonies in your home system, you are in trouble. But if you find out about it halfway across the board, now you have time to prepare. And so that's why you have to take space in the game.
Okay, yeah, you are using asymmetries. You're introducing player-generated asymmetries in the game because everyone can choose what to focus as a mean of getting the game more dynamic, which is very, very, very interesting. And it is one of the main features of your game design style. Lots of customization, lots of personal choices by the players.
So I didn't get questions yet.
Yeah. One moment. We have other questions about Band of Brothers. We will answer them. But then let's get to the last question about Space Empires, the last expansion.
It's the last expansion for a couple reasons. Number one, I'm a completist, and I just wanted to. I don't know, other people are like me. We want to be able to have the complete set and have everything, and we can choose what we want to use, but we want to have everything. And so I wanted to be able to give people an end, as it were. And then I wanted to be able to do things like the master rule book and master scenario book and refine those things. And you do that at the end. And then you don't do that in the middle. And then part of what's driving this is I feel like what's coming out in the last expansion is all of the good things you'll ever want. I have other ideas of things that I could add in, but I really believe they're a step below. And so with everything else that we have, 3 expansions worth is what we'll have on top of the base game. There's no need to put the stuff in that's a cut below. Let's just use the best stuff. Now, as far as what's in there, you get all sorts of things. You get another type of empire, which is going to behave very much like a base empire that you have in the game. It won't be like the replicators. It'll still do its production all the same, but the ship values are different. Some of the ship costs are different, and they have a different ship that will be enjoyable to use. And so it just gives you one more thing that makes it so that now you can play a base empire versus a base empire, or you can play a base one versus a new, or you can play a new versus a new, or you can play a base versus the replicators, or a new one versus the replicators.
Okay,
it gives you a lot of variability. The other thing I like that I really like that's in there is the unique different scenarios. So a couple cards instead of the old scenario table, or which no one really used. It didn't have much use. You'll get a deck of cards, and you can decide how many of these unique conditions you want to flip over. And so you flip over 2 of them, or you flip over 3 of them, and it changes the galaxy, as it were. And then that's going to add to the replayability immensely. And then I like the deep space planet attributes. I like the crew cards. It's just a lot of good stuff. Not a lot of complication. Very simple. We're not, like I said, it's modular. You can add it on. One more thing I do like is we added in logistics facilities, so that if you choose to, you can play with supply, and that will really impact the game in a significant way. So that kind of takes a step back towards the My Monster game days that I was telling you about, where the game took 6 or 7. Space Empire started with a game that took 6 or 7 nights to play. But one of the reasons that drove the length, not that it'll ever get this long or anything like that, but was the idea of supply, where your ships begin to run out of supply the farther they are from a base. And so then you had to build forward supply bases. And it makes it so that you can't go to sleep on your opponent, because if you play with it, they'll still have ships that can carry supply with them. They can load supply on transports, but it'll impact their ability to strike deep in your space unless they put forward bases down. So again, I probably won't play with supply long term, like more than 20% of the time, but I like the fact that it's in the box.
Yeah, the trade routes actually creating an effective trade network and also an effective supply network is one of the key things in the game. We spoke about that before the beginning of the live chat. I am happy because this means that you have created a closed circle, so a good balanced system without layering on lots of stuff. Just like a screenwriter will say, is okay, we're gonna stop on season 7. We're not going on season 8, 9, and 10. That everyone will hate and will ask us why didn't we stop with season 7? But I am also sad because okay, that will be an end. But it is for me. I think that this is a good choice. I've seen too many games. I'm not naming titles, but I've seen too many games spoiled by that layering on effect. And they become cumbersome, contradictory, right. And it is difficult. There will be a master rule book on this last expansion, which is a very good thing, a different version than the one that has also already been written on Board Game Geek.
That's the basis of it, though.
Yeah,
that's the basis of it. I'm going to rearrange a couple of the rules as far as where they are in the book, and then I'm going to add in all of the rules from the expansion, so it'll be one complete set.
Yeah, and it will be very, very practical to read. Now, the last questions about Band of Brothers, which is very specific, I say. Roberto asks us, the new counters as a company identifier and the rules about company command seems interesting. They are passed also to the old games. Do the old games use it? And because the lack of modeling, the army organization is what I perceive as the greatest lack of the system, IMHO, obviously. So the higher level of command.
So yeah, that's especially when it's going to be used in campaign games where you see scenarios together. And so the first one could be in this box. Its stretch goal is 150K, I believe. And if we get that stretch goal, it'll be in the box. It's not going to the other base. It's not going. It's not going into the other games because it'll only be in campaign games. And then you end up tracking the fatigue on the company. And at times you might have to pull a unit out of the line. Oh. And there's a good tension in what it in like you just get. There's a tension in attacking because attacking actually gives you more fatigue, and it puts another thing that you have to consider at like a higher level organization, like you're saying. However, what I'm saying is, if we do another series, let's say we do a campaign game for the ETO, then it'll be in there. It's not like it can't go into the ETO, but we were making this game here and we knew there was a possibility it could be added on. So let's just put the company identifiers on because Dean just wants to do campaign game after campaign game in the Pacific. He wants to have a lot of them. And so this way they'll all be, they'll all have their company identifiers on it, and we can do it as we get there.
It's interesting, the system of resource management in campaign games. So you can just attack. You have to create something of a rotation between different units in the same organization, which is something I do not see very much in campaign games because people just keep bashing on with what they perceive the best units until they expand it and they are stuck with rookie units and they can't go anywhere, especially because the campaign has gone on, and then there are the more complicated scenarios in the second half of the campaign. This was something that happened quite regularly to my BattleTech campaigns, actually, I have to say. Anyway, so we are almost done here. Wow, we are past the hour. Time really flies. Okay. One last thing that you want to say to our public, to our viewers, to our board gamers?
Oh, sure. Thank you for buying the games. I mean, I would have put the work in on these games just for myself because I enjoy them. And so it's really good to be able to share this with other people. And then I love the community that's developed out of it. Like I said, I have some really good team members that help with play testing, that help design, that have all sorts of good ideas. And so the game is better for it. And so, again, thank you for supporting the games. And don't ever be shy about dropping a note down on Board Game Geek.
Absolutely. On Board Game Geek. And Jim will surely answer you because, as we said, is very supportive of his public, and we really like this kind of attitude. So thank you very much, Jim, for being here. It has been there's been a bit difficult. Thank you for the time zone, and I got it right, which is a good thing for me, because I always have trouble with time zones. Anyway, thank you very much for having me being here. And so arrivederci a tutti, ci vediamo alla prossima puntata. È stato un piacere avervi qui con Jim e tutti quanti, e ci vediamo alla prossima puntata. Veramente grazie a tutti quanti. Ciao a tutti.
Ciao.